Greetings, Emissaries, and welcome back to another Archthrones devlog. I'm your host, StrugglerVA, and today we'll be breaking down more changes to gameplay and system mechanics. Our topics for this devlog will be covering the changes made to rings, attack speed, counter damage, and kindlings. Let's begin. For reasons I cannot fully reveal just yet, we've made quite a few adjustments to several rings within the game. The most obvious reason is to adjust the imbalances present across all the rings in Archthrones. This is an attempt to even the playing field when it comes to certain rings being infinitely more useful than others. The other reason, which I have to be incredibly vague about, is the changes to how certain ascended rings are acquired. Normally, to acquire some ascended versions of certain rings, the player would have to beat the game and move on to New Game Plus in order to locate ascended versions of those certain rings. We didn't quite agree with forcing players to start a new game cycle as a method of acquiring upgraded rings. This method was especially problematic when the factor of multiple builds comes into play, forcing you to either beat the game with multiple characters or use external methods such as Cheat Engine or a Mega Mule to save yourself from the agony of beating the game 2 times for each of your 10 characters. Needless to say, obtaining upgraded rings can be accomplished within one game cycle, if you follow a certain NPC questline. But like I said, I can't reveal much more than that as far as story goes. The following adjustments will be made to the final ascensions of each of the following rings. Estus Ring Health Restoration increased from 20% to 30%. Ashen Estus Ring Focus Restoration increased from 20% to 30%. Chloranthy Ring Stamina Regen Speed increased from 10 to 13 stamina per second. Havel's Ring Max Equip Load increased from 19 to 20%. Ring of Steel Protection Physical Damage Absorption increased from 17% in PvE and 5% in PvP to 20% in PvE and 6% in PvP. Additionally, this ring will also grant a flat bonus of 23 to physical defense. All Stoneplate rings, excluding Speckled, have had their dedicated absorption bonuses increased from 20% in PvE and 6% in PvP to 25% in PvE and 8% in PvP. These rings now also grant a flat defense bonus of 30 to their dedicated elemental damage type. Speckled Stoneplate ring damage absorption increased from 7% in PvE and 3% in PvP to 11% in PvE and 5% in PvP. Additionally, this ring bestows a flat defense bonus of 14 to all elemental damage types. Poison Bite Ring Poison Resist increased from 140 to 220. Toxic Resistance increased from 0 to 110. Curse Bite Ring Curse Resist increased from 150 to 230. Chillbite Ring Frostbite Resist increased from 140 to 220. Knight's Ring now bestows a 5% increase to maximum equip load. Hunter's Ring now bestows a bonus of 40 to all status resistances. Scholar Ring and Priestess Ring now bestow a bonus of 10 to virtual dexterity. Gold Covetous Ring item discovery increased from 115 to 200. Silver Covetous Ring soul gain increased from 35 to 40%. Dust Crown Ring decreased FP consumption bonus increased from 25% to 30%. Wolf Ring Poise bonus increased from 9 to 20. Hawk Ring distance bonus increased from 65% to 100%. Night Slayer's Ring stamina damage bonus increased from 20% to 40%. Farron Ring FP consumption bonus increased from 25% to 40%. Additionally, this ring now bestows a 16% increase to maximum stamina. Dragon Scale Ring backstab damage reduction increased from 30% to 60%. Horsehoof Ring now has an additional effect that causes your kicks to inflict 150 flat damage and a hard knockdown. Obscuring Ring now obscures you from PvE enemies as well as PvP. Red and Blue Tearstone Ring now trigger at 18% instead of 20%. Calamity Ring now applies a health regeneration bonus of 10 HP per second at 18% or below of your maximum health. During this bonus, you become over-encumbered and are unable to properly move. Wood Grain Ring now grants an additional effect that reduces weapon stamina consumption by 2%. Ring of Sun's Firstborn now grants an additional bonus of 6 poise and a 5% increase to lightning miracle damage. This ring now has a weight of 2.5. Deep Ring now grants an additional bonus that increases virtual dexterity by 18. Saint's Ring now grants an additional bonus that increases physical miracle damage by 5%. Aldrich Ruby HP gain increased from 85 HP to 85 HP plus 10% of your max HP. Aldrich Sapphire FP gain increased from 15 FP to 15 FP plus 5% of your max FP. Pontiff Left Eye Ring HP gain increased from 30 HP to 30 HP plus 3% of your max HP. Young Dragon Ring has now become its own ring, which reduces FP cost of spells by 15%. Witch's Ring has become its own ring, now increasing max FP by 15% and attunement slots by 2. Leo Ring counter damage bonus reduced from 15% to 6%. For now, that's all for the rings. Let's move on to the changes to attack speed. In previous videos, you've heard me go on about how Archthrones is significantly faster paced than most other Souls titles, usually in references to how a balance change is decided. While this change is mainly focused around PvP balance, this change will certainly bleed into most, if not all, PvE interactions as well. However, unlike most overlaps, this is intentional, as the bosses and enemies you will have to overcome can be quite challenging. That's why we made the decision to increase the speed of nearly every single standard attack in the game. Light attacks, heavy attacks, running attacks, rolling attacks, and backstep attacks. For the standing heavy attacks in particular, we took a page out of Elden Ring's book by retroactively increasing the window in which your release animation will activate, allowing you to have a faster heavy attack alongside more leeway in how you mix up the timing of your heavy attack release. Moving on from the heavy attacks, the rest of the attack roster has been increased in speed to offset the ever-powerful perfect block mechanic that every single melee weapon has immediate access to. Unlike your standard rolls, perfect block activates at the press of a button instead of the release of a button. This allows a player more time to react to attacks with a perfect block than they would have with a roll. Naturally, this can become a little problematic in PvP when every weapon has access to another powerful defensive option to complement the other myriad of defensive options. With the changes made to attack speed in general, we feel that this will push the game's meta in a healthy direction, allowing players more avenues of offense to contrast the existing defensive options. Not to mention, of course, increasing the viability of every weapon in the game to give players more incentive to experiment with lesser used weapons, as opposed to the weapons that eventually find their way to the top of a tier list. Next, allow me to introduce the changes we made to counter damage. To contextualize, counter damage refers to a mechanic that increases the damage dealt by the thrust damage type during the latter part of an attack animation. We've made a few changes to how this mechanic works. Let's start with the most influential. Counter damage has been altered to activate for all physical damage types. To account for this change, we have reduced the bonus damage of thrust counterattacks from 30% to 14%. The counter damage boosts of other damage types are as follows: Slash 11%, Strike 8%, and Standard damage 11%. Naturally, the Leo Ring is also affected by these changes. The counter damage bonus applies a 6% bonus to all physical damage types, boosting thrust damage to 20%, slash and standard to 17%, and strike to 14%. Similar to how it functions in the vanilla game, thrust counters are still the premium damage type for counterattacks. However, more weapons and attacks can make use of this mechanic, although to a lesser degree. We've kept the damage bonuses relatively low to prevent this mechanic from becoming too invasive upon gameplay or disruptive to combat encounters. Yet, we predict the changes made to counter damage will allow other underutilized weapons a chance to shine. Finally, let's quickly go over the changes made to Kindlings. Just as a refresher, these are the items you obtain after defeating certain foes. They function similarly to how rune arcs operate in Elden Ring, granting the player a variety of passive bonuses once active. Sadly, due to technical limitations, these were only available to the host of a world, at least in the demo release of Archthrones. Cooperating phantoms were unable to make use of their kindlings, and upon being summoned to a host's world, the build they crafted around their kindlings fell apart at the seams. As a player, this can feel quite frustrating, and we didn't really see much reason to lock such a supplemental feature behind a single game mode. Luckily, we were able to break past these technical limitations, and for the final release, all kindlings will be made available to hosts, cooperators, invaders, guardians, and duelists alike when present in other players' worlds. We hope this change allows players more freedom and variance in how they build their character. Well, that's it for today's devlog. Once again, thank you for your continued support, and we hope you stick around for the final release. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on our social media platforms to stay up to date on any Archthrones related news. If you want to support us, the links to our Ko-fi and Patreon are in the description as always. Until next time.